record. Oh, thank you.
I'd like to call this meeting of the Charter Review Commission to order. Secretary.
Robert Brennan.
I'm sort of here.
You count. Scott Copley. Here. Scott Guthrie. Here. Jim Humphrey. Brad Mayer. Here. Ben Perrin. Sarah Repose.
Here.
Michael Stevens, I'm here. And Ted Tracy.
Here.
Jim Humphrey did say that he was with his mother in the hospital and he's gonna try to make it, but he may not.
Now ask Ben to do the emergency evacuation.
Should an emergency arise, please exit on that door.
Now I'd like to ask for the approval of the minutes from January 5th and January 26th. Everybody got a copy of them, correct? Are there any corrections?
The first one, my last name is spelled wrong.
T-R-A-C-E-Y is it?
No, wait.
No, we.
I'll correct it.
For the record, I may take this minutes.
So all in
I
favor?
absolve you for the second one. Well, that must be why it was correct. And the second was.
Are there any other corrections? So, do I call for a motion or do I just ask if you approve
I'll
the
make
minutes?
a motion to approve as amended.
Any second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. So we come to item 6, which is old business. Further discussion regarding the elections terms, party affiliation and ballots. Ben and I were working outside before the meeting, and I'm trying to get you copies of the ballots for the last 6 elections, copies of the results of those elections. And what I brought up in the past was the undervote. So the undervote is someone who potentially could vote for a town council candidate that didn't, regardless of party. But we have nonpartisan elections, so it's the total number. I think it's pretty important when people don't show up to, they have no clue or no idea of how they're going to be represented, and typically for years and years and years, it's done by party. So we will work on that. You'll have that information. And then I'm also going to include, I probably won't have it unless we can get it to you before the next meeting, is the actual cost of what it's cost the taxpayers for these elections. And the difficulty is trying to get someone to commit to be on the town council for 4 years. We've had people resign. We've had people change offices, which created another election, which is expensive. You might think it's not expensive, but the last 2 that we had were $4,200 each. It's not a lot of money, but it's not budgeted. The only thing that's budgeted by the Board of Canvassers, I believe, is the general election, the primary election, financial town meeting. And I think that they say they budget for 1 special election, just in case, something awry should happen. So, if we're dealing with something that costs the town, say, $10,000 or $15,000 every year, then it might be a good thought to go back to the old process. And elections aren't only, hi Rick, and elections aren't only run locally, they're run by the state. So there's, the time process, the filing process and all that all takes time, it all costs money. Clerks, rental of buildings, for polling places and all of that. So, and I know the town manager is frugal, and I want to help him save a little bit of money, so.
And there's also early voting now too. for
And
10 days
early voting, yes.
Leading up, so that's an additional expense that probably wasn't accounted for.
Right. But I think that the experiment of nonpartisan voting simply doesn't work for the taxpayer. It seems like less people are showing up to vote because there's no will for them to go and say, well, I'd like to go and vote for this person. When you're running for office, and as Brad can say, and I can say, and Scott can say, and you're asking for someone to vote for you, they'd like to know where you stand. And we're all honest. So it's, well, this is the way I align myself, whether you're a conservative or liberal or progressive, or if you're a super conservative, whatever. It's what people really want to know. So are there any questions that anybody has about, the in favor or opposed to like the term limit, excuse me, not term limits, the election process being partisan or nonpartisan?
So this is what I would first start out by asking. If we want to go back to have a partisan element to it, do we want to do the traditional, each party has their primary, and then the general election is all the primary candidates that win, and then any independents, or do we want to do something where it's more like one of the jungle primaries where you have a primary with everyone on the ballot, maybe pick two, and then the top two, who could be two of the same party, are going
That's
at
what
the
we
general
have right
election.
now with nonpartisan, believe it or
Right.
not.
If
But we
that's
just don't know.
needed,
Okay.
you'd have to
So
follow
it's,
state law.
it can create a runoff, and that just adds to the expense of an election. So the traditional partisan, or if you can run as an independent, you
Yep.
have to put your name under any.
Right, you can put,
any
you can put
column.
I next to it, and
And also in the state, there's no more straight ticket, so when they eliminated the straight ticket voting, and that was, I think,
14, I
2014,
think.
yeah, the national level was gone.
Last year was
Right.
14.
and in 2010, they passed nonpartisan, but it wasn't until 2012 election. So I think a lot of people were apprehensive to even go vote, or they were disenfranchised, or they just had no will or no reason to want to go to the polls. So we should be making it easier for people to vote. And I think that the nonpartisan made it harder for people to vote, because now they have to search over a ballot. And I think that you'll see on I went back to 2008. You'll see on the ballots that you're going to be provided with, the town people are not in the two columns that are traditionally looked at. They're off to the side.
Mhm.
So,
It's one big long thing. you vote for it.
right. So, oh, Jim's here.
All things good. Procedure went well.
Okay. fantastic. We're concerned about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess during the election, you could probably have people show up to vote and they're going down the thing, and then they get to the town council and they say, well, who's who, and then they just go, I'm not gonna vote for anything, you just kick it over. So now you have somebody who voted on everything else, and they could get to that point because it's not a nonpartisan, they might say, well, these people, none of them knocked at my door, I don't know who's who, so I'm just gonna not vote for any of them, they just put the ballot in, so now you do have like a number, because you can look at the numbers and maybe say, hey, this polling place had, say 10,000 voters, but why was there only, 8,240 votes for the town council people? There was 2,000 people.
Your
who might not.
example just explained with an undervote there.
Yeah,
Someone that had the ability to vote for someone but chose not to.
exactly.
Is it
because-
possible for us to look at those numbers to see how many undervotes?
Yes, you'll be getting all of that.
Yeah, I'd appreciate seeing that. Most communities right now who are making charter changes are actually going in the opposite direction. They're going from partisan elections to nonpartisan elections. And another school of thought is that when you don't have a party affiliation next to your name, it forces people to learn the candidates rather than just saying, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. So that's another, or I'm just going to vote for these people because based on their party. So I mean, it's definitely, I could carry either way, but it's definitely another school of thought that, you're now getting people who are uninformed voters that are just voting for people based on their party.
Right. And that's not a problem for me. What is a problem for me is when you don't have a party, nobody votes for you. Scott just gave that example too. So
Yeah.
like you'll see, they're gonna have ballots that go back to 2008 that have the straight ticket there. And then you're actually gonna see town council and school committee
Yeah, I'm
candidates
very
on that.
interested in seeing.
And then, you're gonna, after the master level was, removed, you're gonna see the change in the ballot style. And you're gonna see where that particular person is on the ballot.
Right.
And there is a breakdown of how many votes they got, how many the opponents got, and the whole 9 yards, and all the way down at the bottom, and the
Right.
circle around it is gonna be my circle that says, this many people could have voted for this candidate but chose not to. So
No,
What-
I'm very interested to see.
Yeah, I like to see.
Yeah, I-
The numbers.
before.
It's interesting, and I really want to say too, because like what you just said. When you say generically, I like the idea of having nonpartisan because now, let's just say I walk into the polling place, I see John Smith and Jane Doe. I don't know who's representing what. I actually have to figure out who these people are and what they stand
Right.
for. Versus before, I could just say, I just go to the ballot and I vote for whoever has to pick which side of the aisle you're on.
Right.
But if it's now causing people to say, well, I don't know what they are and I didn't do anything and I don't have my fallback, I'll just leave it blank. That's also concerning
Yeah,
to
that
me.
is
then.
concerning too, yeah.
yeah, well, the other part of it is the lack of journalism now and social media now. It's, and the difficulty, especially in the last election, with people going door to door. A lot of
Yeah.
people that ran for office chose not to do it. For
Many reasons.
for many, many reasons, and I think, I actually ran for office in the last election, and I walked, and there were some people that wouldn't answer their door. So it kind of works both ways, and with the lack of journalism that we have now, who's gonna know where you stand other than going on Facebook and Instagram? And I'm sure all of the people that normally vote all the time aren't gonna look at that, those venues to decide who they want to put in office.
That's where it's nice to have the partisan on the ballot, because if you don't have the time to research all the candidates, you at least know who mostly aligns with your values.
Your
Right, right.
values, right. Yeah, no, it's definitely, like I said, I'd be really interested to see the numbers.
You'll have a copy
We'll
hopefully
see.
tonight if we can get it done before.
Because it's an interesting perspective. I haven't heard of anyone going back to partisan at this point, so it's interesting to bring up that.
Yeah.
I'll go keep a
perspective.
photocopy.
Oh, okay.
You
Okay.
guys discuss.
Yeah, so Ben can go out and continue making the copies of those ballots.
Part of my job is
and I
I'm
just-
on election.
Yeah.
Hey, Scott, this is Jim. I know I'm late, but it sounds like there's some reasoning to go back to partisan of party affiliation designation on a ballot. And the main reason for that is why?
It's because of the undervote, people, when they proposed it, I believe it was in 2010. It didn't take effect until 2012. And, or I could be off by 2 years. I'm not entirely sure it's going to show up on the ballots and you'll get a copy of it. But the reason was that it would have you search and be an informed voter by looking at the ballot at all the different names. So that just didn't work out. And what's happened is if X voted for a certain person at the next level, we'll say in government, and was coming down the ballot to vote for, a local candidate, and chose not to because A, they didn't know the person, B, they didn't know what party they were, or for whatever other reason. That person did not vote for a candidate he or she could have voted for. So that's an undervote. So if you or I were running for election, we would make sure that we get that vote in any way possible. The nonpartisan part of the system we have now is making it harder for people to vote, and it's making it less likely for people to vote because they don't know their values. I think that Stephen just brought up.
Interesting. Or the question could be, how could we get them to know the candidates better?
Well, yeah, it would be, partisan elections, you'd know where they stand. And it doesn't preclude anyone from running as an independent. And that's important. I think that everybody thinks that you have to run under a party label. You do not.
The only issue with running as an independent, and I've seen with my candidates, is if you do, you are now going to be last on the ballot. So if you're running in a partisan election, the state will choose whether the Republicans go first on the ballot or the Democrats do. And
No, the
then
federal government does, whoever
the
runs, for-
Secretary of State's office does the lottery for our local
whoever the sitting president is, okay, that is the party that goes first on the ballot.
in a presidential election. But in,
And
like
yeah,
this
well,
year, in the,
I'll have to look at that.
Then the off was they do the golf ball thing. They take.
That's how they pick
put on it,
numbers.
Right,
They
that's how they do it, yeah.
It's-
They do a lottery and.
Yeah, I thought it was random, yeah.
director of elections.
But you're saying
performs
that
it.
independents are on, or the top two are automatically DNR, just flip a coin.
Correct, so the state will choose come November whether the Democrats or the Republicans go first via lottery.
And that'll be the
And
same,
then-
the whole wherever,
Right.
okay.
And then independents are always last. So
Huh.
that, in a partisan election, oftentimes candidates who are independent choose to affiliate instead just because of the fact that they don't want to be last on the ballot.
Don't you also get pushed, don't you go right to the general election if you're independent? You don't
That
have to
is
worry about.
correct, no
primary.
primary.
First time I ran was as an independent, so there was no Republican that ran, and there was no Democrat primary, you know, so we both went right to the.
But that could also be multiple people running
Right,
as independent, so.
Yeah, you could have like, a five-way race, because you could have like a Republican run, a Democrat run, 3 independents, you know?
Mhm.
And people are really.
Point two. Terms. We talked about terms and I'm not a huge, if I were to say, should there be term limits, I would say no, because there are elected officials that do very well, no matter what level of government that you're at. How you guys feel about it is, it is because I think that when we get a chance to make a decision on this, and I have a question for Ben about it. When we vote on something, I want to make sure that each of these items, it's party affiliation, it's terms, it's ballot placement and all of that. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. And I can even ask you and I can ask Ben afterward. I would like to send a primer to the council and say, this is how the commission feels, instead of just putting it in a final summary and walking up in front of the town council saying, here you go.
Right.
So if we say, here are many of the reasons that we think it's important to change back, keep it the same, term limit.
Right.
They have an idea earlier than when we present a whole package. And it kind of like would prime them, and I'm sure that they would probably do their own study and investigate, to calm their own minds. So, and politics is up and down, left and right, top and bottom, so. But,
Scott, if I
Yeah.
can comment, if I can just comment on what you were just mentioning. One of the things I was doing today while not running up and down the stairs for my poor wife, is I put together, it's a document based on things that we used to use in my consulting career for, just coming up with decisions and such. I have a draft that I put together based on one of the things we had talked about last week, the members at large. I can send that out. I think that might address what you're looking to get. It's basically, what is the question? What are the applicable sections, pros and cons, questions that are related to it. If this section refers to something else that's a topic, it's a cross-reference for that. Recommendations, basically outlining the thought process behind it, and get typed up that could be handed out as kind of that type of a document. I can get a copy of that out to everybody.
are you asking if we should include at-large candidates in with our package? Or,
We had talked about at one point, and it's one of the items that was brought up, as to whether or not there should be 2 members at large. That just happened to be the question that I used for the example. I needed a topic. Okay, so this particular example in and of itself is not necessarily one that the commission is necessarily going to follow up on. I'm just putting it in there as an example.
Right. Well, my question was, is there's been talk around in the past about at-large seats. There's been talk in the past about having a mayor. And yes, we do have the authority to put that question to the council. The council will either accept or reject whatever question we want to send to the voters. Which makes it kind of hard for me because we're tasked to ask the voters what they would like to have with, through their input, through our input as a commission, and to have it get shut down, because the council doesn't think it's either one, ready for this time, and two, it's too politically volatile or whatever. But we do have the authority to ask any question of the voters that we want to.
Yeah, and basically what this is something that allows you to put down what the rationale behind that decision is. Why is this the recommendation?
Kind of like a decision support document, something like that. Yeah, makes
Exactly.
sense. That's a good idea.
It's not the decision itself, it's the thought process behind it. So I can put this out as an example. Just like anything else that I put out there, they're examples. I'm not trying to force my ideas down on the committee, but if it's something that we can utilize or modify to make it useful to us and as a tool to bring to the town council, it gives us a history as to why it's coming, why we're saying this, and what we looked at.
Great. The other thing I want to mention to you is I still have not got my computer to open that spreadsheet up. I don't know why. Perhaps it's because my hard drive went, I had a new one put in, and maybe the software never got back in there for me to read an Excel file or whatever. So I'm either going to task Mike to send me a hard copy or Ben to send me a hard copy so I can actually see it line by line, column by column.
It's very useful. Thank you
Yeah.
for putting it together, Bob. And I'm happy to print you one too.
Oh, great.
So offering to share my OneNote files aren't going to help you at all, huh?
He's our clerk / secretary.
There we go.
I can print it. So I can save it as a PDF and send it to you.
Yeah.
It really has streamlined me being able to look at the important stuff, so I appreciate it.
So finishing out on item 6 here about the elections. Maybe next week, we can make a decision on this.
Yeah.
And you can take, the hard copy information that you have and whatever research you want to do. And we can come back and put that like as a check mark that we'd like to see this go. Maybe take a formal vote or not take a formal vote. It depends on how you feel about it and whether we should prime the town council on the reasons behind this.
Yeah.
This commission. Do you think that that's the right thing to do?
Yeah, I
or-
do. I think whatever way we go, like Bob had alluded to, that we should definitely have supporting information as to this is why we feel this way.
Okay,
But yeah, no, that's great.
all right, fantastic.
And just so I'm clear, there's two things. We're talking about partisan, nonpartisan designation as a question, as a decision, right? And then Bob's got a decision document that allow us, all of us, to fill something in maybe with our research and thoughts that we could pull together, talk about and decide next week. Is that what we're saying?
Well, possibly, whether we just want to check it off as, we're pretty much for it. And if there are other things that we need to add, like Bob was talking about the at-large seat, I don't see a whole lot of the public watching this meeting. And we did discuss our last meeting, we discussed sending out some kind of a poll that the town manager thought might be a low budget. We need your input type thing.
Mhm.
So maybe we'll just keep it the way it is for now. You'll have that other information. And I may change a few things. I was speaking with the manager and actually Scott and saying that what I'd like to have is a copy of the 1972 charter in print form. And at the back of it, and Ted was with the conversation too. And every amendment that had happened and the reasoning behind it, so that when I was in the General Assembly, every committee meeting that we had everything right in front of us. We might have 20 bills in our folder that we could write on, and we could do things that we need to do, but the language is right there in front of you. I'm not a huge person on the electronic stuff, and black and white to me is just much easier because I'm not the greatest computer person in the world, because you can tell I can't get Bob's information to open up.
I like my paper too.
I print out a lot of stuff, so.
All right, so I'm gonna talk to Ben, and I'm gonna see if we can get that. And then if you want, you can either take your folders home, or you can keep it here. You can keep notes on it, and it makes it so much easier that you can turn and flip a page and say, oh yeah, we did discuss that. So great. So now we'll go to 6.1 charter discussion, and the next thing that I thought was important to bring up, I think it's important, the town manager had asked about it, 2 council persons had asked about it, and that's the town solicitor. So I'd like to probably put on a section of next week's meeting, discussion on the town solicitor. Whether we want to make the town solicitor an employee, whether we want to continue with the billable hour thing that's going on. We can probably get together some financial information about it. And I think we may have to pick someone to start to join our group, so that we can have someone here to turn over and look at that knows both the state law and the local law. And I know you had made a suggestion. We'll keep that in mind. So maybe our next step after the election thing will go right to solicitor. And if we focus on one thing for a set of meetings, and it makes it easier than to have 5 different things that we're going to discuss at each meeting. We have until the middle of May to come back with recommendations. So that would be that.
So you're saying the discussion, I just want to make sure the document's right.
Yeah.
Regarding the town solicitor, not changing the position in general for the town solicitor, just relevant.
It's gonna be a discussion about how we do it now, and can we do it in a more cost-effective way and so forth. So,
Okay, so well, that's good.
yeah,
Okay.
so
I think it was, I might have this backwards. Right now, the solicitor is appointed by the town manager, right? And
appointed by the
they're-
manager
and they're
and
looking to maybe switch that to the
Town
council, appointed by the
Yeah.
council, if I read that correctly.
That's what was,
That
that was
was one
what
of
the
the
suggestion
suggestions
was
from
from a couple.
yeah.
Okay, all right. I thought I caught wind of that somewhere.
Yeah, so the town council wanted to appoint him instead of
The manager, okay.
All right, so next week we'll touch on the election and balloting and all of that stuff. And maybe put that on pretty much close to the end in our bucket list. And so the next item on our agenda is to have our next meeting, and it seems that everybody is in agreement with Wednesdays. Are you still good with Wednesdays?
Yeah, yep, Wednesdays work for me. I will be a week away the week of school vacation. That's the only time I won't be able to commit.
Is that a certain week in the future, or is it next week?
No,
Nope,
2 weeks from now, right?
it's- I think so. Hold on.
I will be here too.
There's
2
one
Wednesdays
Wednesday.
from now.
3 Wednesdays from now. Yeah,
Okay,
so,
and yours is,
2 Wednesdays from today.
okay,
So the 15th,
and
16th.
16.
you're good because you're actually, you took your compadre with you tonight.
Yeah, normally I can, now that they're Zoom this thing, I can do it on Zoom. Right, I can be in person or at home.
Right, okay. But all in all, Wednesdays seem to be a good day of the
Yeah.
week.
Yeah, I got one at the end of the month. I think it's the same one as. you
All right,
guys.
so,
Yeah, me too.
we'll just make sure that the recorder's still running, and you'll be able to participate by watching what all of us
yeah.
discuss.
Yeah,
And no decision will be made with less than 9 people. So there will be 9 votes on every issue that we cast. So we're gonna stick with the Wednesdays, and now we have public comment. I see, let me see, I see one person out there.
Only me.
Hi, Rick. How are you?
Good. This is an interesting forum. Usually, you have to raise your hand and the participants that aren't part of the board are off to the side, but anyway,
See, well, we're in the managers conference room, so
Yeah.
there's no audience here. The audience is there, and let me see. You're the only
non-member.
non-member here. Is there anything that you'd like to see?
I would, first of all, whether or not you can meet virtually in this format remains to see if the governor extends the order past this Friday, because that's due to expire on the 4th. I did enjoy listening to the talk about nonpartisan elections. I am a proponent of partisan elections. Couple of things. In a nonpartisan election, if 3 people put their name in, 1 Democrat, 1 Republican, or maybe 2 Democrats, 1 Republican, 1 independent, there's a runoff. There's no chance ever for there to be more than 2 names on the ballot in November because of the way that it's set up. And it also costs the candidates a lot of money. If it was a Democrat, a Republican, and an independent, they would automatically be on the November ballot. The way it works now is the town has to basically go through that runoff election, and they all have to campaign. They have a very short window. And anyway, that's my comment there. I think it drives up the cost. I listened to the comments about, well, people will be forced to educate themselves. You guys are all volunteers for this board, and you all stepped up to participate in your community, and you should be commended for that. Most people, when they actually go to vote in November, if it's a presidential election, they're going to vote for president. Maybe if someone asked them if they would go make sure they voted for them, whether it's a state rep or a school committee person or a senator or whatever it might be. But most people, when they get there, they're there to vote for president. And when they get down to the bottom of the ballot, it's either name recognition, party affiliation, or they just don't vote. And as you pointed out, Scott, there were a lot of undervotes once they initiated this. So I think you should take a hard look at some of the data and see where that goes. I think knowing where someone stands, and again, they could be an independent, that's fine. They could be affiliated with either party, goes a long way into helping folks make a decision when they're in the voting ballot. I believe, I don't have the proof, but I think in 2010, when they changed that, it was done primarily because one party felt they were at a disadvantage. They were in control, and they felt they were at a disadvantage every time there was an election with the master lever, and that people would go in and pick one party over the other. And they wanted to change that. And the staggered terms, I think, had to do with resources. It was difficult for either party to run an election for 5 seats on a council and 2 or 3 school committee seats every 2 years. It was just easier to only have to worry about 5 seats in any given election as far as resources at the polls and funding money into elections. I think, as we've seen, there's been a lot of people that have had to resign within the 4-year term. They haven't even made it the whole 4 years, and it forces a special election, which actually costs the town money. And the other thing with term limits, it'll be interesting to see. The last time we had 2 years ago, I think it was, no, 4 years ago, the school committee seats, all 3 seats were unopposed. The incumbents just put their names in. Some of them didn't even want to run, but since no one else was running, they put their names in. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with the school committee seat in District 1. I don't think Luke Murray would have run. I can't speak for him, but if he knew he was going to have an election, but pretty much said, I'll put my name in, and it was kind of known no one else was going to run. Which is another interesting thing, because in a partisan election, a lot of the way that the elections are conducted, even at the local level, are governed by state law. So if one person puts their, or 2 people, let's say, put their name in and someone withdraws, there's still a provision where right up until the primary date, the party chairman has the ability to try to find a candidate and just appoint them to the ballot. I could be mistaken. I'd have to get more data on that. And the last thing I'll comment on is I don't believe whether you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent, the Secretary of State's office has a lottery for ballot placement. I'm not sure that they force the independents to be last in November. That doesn't make sense to me. I think it's just a lottery straight up. I know during the primary, somebody gets the asterisk if they've been endorsed. And I don't even think ballot placement there necessarily means the endorsed candidate gets first position. They did away with the alphabetical order years ago. I believe the Secretary of State's office conducts the lottery, whereas the nonpartisan elections, the town conducts the lottery. So I think that probably should be investigated.
On a local level, they do their own lottery. However, if it is a partisan election for a council, and let's say the Republicans won that year at the state level, the Republican candidates would go first. The town would have, if they had 4 Republican candidates, they would have to draw 4 different names and pick the placement, unless if your charter said it was an alphabetical order, which it doesn't. Local parties are done at the town level. However, the placement of party, I don't know if I'm making sense to all of you right now, is determined by the state. But then the order of those candidates is chosen by the town for local races.
Yeah. And the other interesting thing is the primary, you either get a Republican ballot or a Democratic ballot, but then in these runoff elections that the town has, you got to get a third ballot that basically gets handed to every person that shows up, which I think is another unusual little twist and costs money. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. I'm in favor of partisan elections and 2-year terms for council. So if somebody has a problem with that council person, they can not elect them the next time around, or somebody else has an opportunity to step up and maybe do a better job. That's all.
So Rick, what I did is I made copies of the ballots from 2008 until the last election. And it also has an insert that has the voter participation, you know, how many you got, how many your opponent got, the whole 9 yards, and the undervote and overvotes, as a matter of fact. Overvotes are, you know, yeah, they're scant. But I think that Ben just finished printing them all, so you'll all get to take the official ballots from the last 6 elections, and you can take a look. They'll start in 2008, and you'll see the straight party ticket is there. You'll also see my name on it. But I think that that'll give you a better look at what a ballot looks like, particularly I think with the independent thing. So when there was a straight party option, okay, I think that the independent voter was in the 3rd column. I think I'll have. So don't you know, quote me on that. You're going to have it in black and white in front of you. So
yeah, I look forward to seeing it. It does say in the charter about ballot or order, and it does say that there's a lottery conducted by the Board of Canvassers and Registration, which is on the local level, which determines the ballot order.
Yeah. So great. Thanks for the public comment, and I appreciate it, Rick. And I just want to go back to Ben for a minute. While you were out working so hard to get us information, I'm going to put you to work a little harder. And I think I brought it up before, where I'd like to have a copy of the original charter that started in 1972. That was voted on by the people, and every amendment afterwards. You don't have to print the different charters, just the change in the language. So you know how to read it like I know how to read it. You go down and to the bottom and it says it was changed on this day and so forth. And you can just print that page, and we can insert it into the regular language that we started with. I'm thinking that there were probably at the most 15 charter changes since 1972. And that's just a guess. I could be lowballing it, but I think it's going to be around that area. And like I said, that you can have that in front of you when we're discussing things, and it's a whole lot easier because Sarah just look something up for us because she had it in front of her. She took the
I work with a
initiative.
lot of charters.
Right. So just so it'll be, easy for all of us, we'll make sure that everybody gets that. Then make copies of the ballots next week. I'll have copies of the cost. When people can't either choose not to continue their term or decide to run for a different office, causing a vacancy.
Right.
So all these different things that add to the cost, the big thing that needs to be done in town right now is save money. So if you're looking at things fiscally, and I know the manager is, because I know he wants to run a tight ship, and so do I, and I'm sure so do the taxpayers. So let's make sure we have every single bit of information that we can get our hands on, and then make a decision on that.
And do we want to also look at possibly changing our special election procedures? So, because that was the other thing.
I don't think that you can, because Title 17 is elections. So there has to be,
We could change.
Well, I meant the timing.
The
'Cause
timing.
That was it. One other thing that crossed my mind, but
You mean
I know,
the- you
no,
mean
I'm
the
talking
spe-
about like how,
you mean the special, if somebody leaves the seat?
like it doesn't,
Right.
like it won't change now, but like looking at maybe changing so that it's not the next election for your seat, the next election that's scheduled, that meets all the requirements.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
we're going through that now, I believe, with Luke.
Yeah.
Luke left the school committee, and
It's like for Luke, there's gonna be a special election, that's already decided, but like looking at the same circumstances and saying, do we want to put a change that if this exact same circumstance happened again,
Yeah.
we could appoint someone and then have the special election be in this November because we already have an election scheduled. It's not gonna really cost us anything to put one more item on the ballot.
so what I have read, and it's been changed a couple of times, is that if there's a vacancy in the school committee,
Mhm.
and it's within the last 12 months of that
Of their
term,
term,
Right.
the person is appointed by the town council.
correct, for the remainder of that term.
Why wouldn't that person be appointed by the school committee? There are two different things.
Right.
Yep.
And I mentioned that the town and the municipal side of things are run mostly by the town charter ordinances and so forth. The school committee is all state, it's all Title 17. I thought it was 17.
17, you said was election.
Yeah, 17 was like, yes,
Yeah.
you're right, 16. Yeah, 16 is education, so that's something, whatever the,
Yeah,
whatever.
no, that's an interesting, I hadn't really thought of that. I was thinking more of the timing aspect of it, because right now you have to be within 12 months of that term, possibly change it to if before the next election, if it's within 12 months.
And that might
That was
take-
the one that I
And
was,
that might take the politics out of it too.
I don't know, the school committee appointing one of their own peers, is that really any different than the town council appointing
Is that
someone
a check and
to
balance
work with
there?
them? Yeah,
That's a good point.
because if they're, let's say that the school committee split 2-2,
Mhm.
who's gonna resolve the disagreement?
True.
Very good
That's
point.
true.
Yeah. And if you got three that say, well, we like this guy, the other guy goes, well, I don't really like that person, now they appoint somebody that kind of aligns with them, So no, it could be, so I think you gotta.
Not that you wouldn't have politics with the town
Anything,
council
but-
either,
yeah,
but.
the
It
town
has
council,
separate
picks their
They-
own replacement if it's within 6 months, or
Yeah.
I think
Isn't that how-
it's up to 12, I think.
No, it's.
So six.
there's
Six
something else.
for
we can
council,
look at.
Yeah,
vote
it's
for-
six. Yeah.
But at least you
yeah.
have another entity doing it instead of that, right?
There is a separation
Yeah.
and a rationale. Now, in another jurisdiction, the town council routinely filled their own vacancies by appointments in those circumstances. So, I mean, it is what it is, but the benefit is it's only short term, less than a year.
Right.
What else did I want to say while you were going? Another question I have. Escapes me now. I hate it when that happens. I should have written it down.
I gotta write everything down.
But, I know what it was. The poll. Remember we talked about doing some kind of a low budget question and answer thing, and
What
And-
forum were you thinking? Like on
We just
social media
successfully
or-
completed a website survey. We got 391 responses on the ARPA COVID funds survey. So
Okay, that's good.
it was very respectable.
Is that something we can put on the next agenda to come up with specific questions?
Sure. Is that what you'd like to see?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to us in making decisions to get some input and see, just a thought, we just need to decide on what specific questions we want,
Right.
like our top 3 or something.
Yeah,
I think given the time that you have and the rate at which you're going through this, to have multiple short surveys could be very effective because
Right.
we can do the code red to text or email and have people then respond. And if it's just 3 or 4 questions or 10 questions even,
Right.
they'll get a quick response. And then you can do another survey on the next section of questions that you want to address. And maybe getting that information along the way might be more effective than a 50-question survey that.
I
People get tired of.
I agree. Yeah.
In a long survey, anything
I
past
also-
question 5, it's irrelevant. They're not picking what they mean.
I also think you were out of the room when I brought up, oh God, I hate it when I can't remember that. Priming the council. In other words, instead of sending a giant package over there at the end at a council meeting and begging for its passage with our explanation, if we were to vote on a given topic. So the one that we're working on right now is election and ballot placement and partisanship and stuff like that. Now, we can wrap this up and we can send just our little, or we can send something to them as like a primer. This is something that we think is important so that they have something ahead of time instead of
Kind of
Just-
like
just
the
a big
surveys, yeah.
right.
Just-
Instead of one presentation with all these different things.
They would appreciate preliminary progress reports.
Okay.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah,
It's
pretty
just
much.
progress, and that way, when you're done with this section, you move on to the next section, and they have more time to.
Kind of digest and go out.
Right.
Because I know that a couple of council people are in favor of the 4-year terms and the partisan. But I think with an explanation about the cost and the ability to keep someone or to retain, get someone to run first off and then retain the person, to stay. You brought up a good point 2 meetings ago, Ben, where you said that, it's tough when you have a council that is like just coming in. So right now you have a fairly new council. And that's one of the reasons I'm not big on terms because, he knows that, continuity and
Yep.
and carrying things forward is the way to make government, make government work.
I
So,
definitely agree with that. At the local level, I think it's important.
Yeah.
Especially nowadays where we don't have a bunch of people signing up to take these positions.
so does anybody else have any other questions before we adjourn? Jim, your volume's off.
You are correct. Ben, I remember last time you mentioned how we can communicate. And I think you mentioned there can't be a lot of emailing between ourselves during the week.
No, that's
Yeah.
against the rules.
Yeah, so how's the best way to communicate is always through you.
Yes.
Got it. Just wanted to confirm that. And is there a place, are we gonna have a place to retain documents like a cloud-based like repository or something like that we could always access?
So we have one set up with the original link that I sent you to access the documents,
I saw that.
access those.
Okay.
I don't know how to get back to it, so I'll have to
We,
talk
we could use that. Okay.
without going to the link. But I remember I did move another document. It was the spreadsheet into there that was that Ben who prepared it, Ben Perrin? Yeah,
Yeah,
Because ultimately we need a repository and Bob's idea sounds like a good one. It might lend itself to the primer that you talked about, Scott, or a document. Well, I guess we'll see it if it gets shared.
I would say that if we have a repository, I think it totally works is if everyone's depositing information into it and everyone happens to go in and read it, as long as it isn't in the form of a communication and asking questions to each other that would violate the meeting law, I think you're okay with sharing information, but that's why I would have it come through me just to make sure there is a break in that direct
You
communication.
can make the call on that. Okay.
Bob and Jim, would you like to have, what I suggested earlier was the original copy of the charter? And
Yes.
insert, I mean, in black and white form?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah, I'll scan it into where I keep my records so that I have, that's just because I do that because I like to be able to access it wherever I happen to be.
I
But
was gonna ask.
I usually print something off when I have to really go through it.
Me too.
I was gonna ask the manager to put that there and then look up I think it was maybe 12, 14, 16, whatever changes that were made since its inception in there. And then you'll be able to write notes on it, carry it with you if you're meeting on Zoom, or, bring it in here with you when we're discussing things, and you can keep your own little notes in it. And it just makes it a lot easier. And the reason I say that is, like I said, when I was in the General Assembly, it was, right in front of you. When you go to a committee meeting, the clerk would give you your package, and then you could either destroy it, draw circles and arrows and stuff on it if you wanted to, but.
Yeah.
It's
So the
great.
best tool is the one that fits your hand.
And, all right, so before we adjourn.
Scott,
Yes.
just on one thing now that Ben's back, if you'd like, if Ben, you can have me share my screen, I can show you the draft of the document that I was doing.
Sure.
Sounds good. Yep.
You got to enable me.
Am I freezing up in you guys? Because I know the group in the room, that frame tends to freeze a lot on me. Maybe it's my bandwidth or your bandwidth.
Go to the little green box that says share
Yep.
screen.
Well, that's sharing my
That's
screen.
right, yeah.
Yeah,
Go-
Pyro,
Is it Bob
then
that wants to share?
give
Permission
sharing
to, right?
options. And then allow all participants. I should do it.
Okay, go for it.
Here we go. Okay. Okay, you seeing a document?
Yes.
Okay, so basically, this happens to be the section that I use as an example. Town council membership, what's the question, the applicable section of the charter, discussion on pros and cons, any related questions, recommendations. We can also put something in here for discussion as well. And then the proposed changes down below. Stays in draft status with a watermark until it's approved and voted on. That comes off and it becomes a document that can go in. And if you'd like, what I can do is I can do this for the question that we're discussing next week as far as the partisan elections, and I could do basically the same type of thing if you want to start working with something like that.
Great. That's good. So,
That's nice.
going back to that, when we're dealing with elections, is this going to be a bundle or is it going to be separate? In other words, nonpartisan, is that going to be a question? Term limits, is that going to be a question?
I think it
Ballot
would be
question?
separate. Yep.
Okay.
I think it should be separate.
Yeah, it would be separate. It'd be separate on the ballot as well.
Yeah, because you join it together, might be like too much.
Yeah, all right. Well, usually if you can get it worded the right way,
Yeah.
and
So I'll
and
have to
you
worry.
can-
Yeah.
and folks can understand it and not have to really struggle to tear something apart. So we might be able to combine a couple of
I
things.
think
Right.
the best thing you can do is, formulate beyond the question, the rationale and the arguments and the explanations of what you're trying to accomplish and why. And ultimately, I think if whatever goes on the ballot is going to be according to the ballot form and the requirements, but that's not to say the town can't have there were kind of findings and report out there on the website for people to research and read, so they understand why it is you're asking this question on the ballot, and why you're asking the town council to consider it, because, you know, by itself, I don't know, should terms be 2 years or 4 years? I don't know, I'm just gonna put whatever I think, but if you're saying that we think we'll get more participation with 2 years than 4 years, or we'll have more continuity with 4 years than 2 years, it gives people some rational basis that
Yeah.
you've already discussed, and you're bringing them along with you to that decision.
The other thing while you were out of the room, was next week, when we were under item 6, I think it was, we'd like to talk about the solicitor's office, and we might want to consider having someone here, you know, give us a little bit of legal guidance.
Okay.
So after next week, I think we'll discuss it. It'll be on the agenda. And then we'll see if you guys want to have someone here, if you think if it's important to have someone here, then we'll start that process. And that's
I'd say-
going to help us in drafting language too.
I'm not opposed to having someone here next week, but it might be.
It won't be next week.
Or the next meeting, it might be helpful to get the conversation going first, so you know what your questions are, and then schedule them for the next meeting as a follow-up.
Like I said, I was going to put it on the agenda. We'll discuss
Yeah, I
it.
think that's his intention.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is to not have someone here
Every
necessarily,
time.
but to get things in order, so once we are ready to bring them in, that we have someone. to come up.
Yes, that-
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. So before we adjourn also, this is just something I had the board of canvassers do for me. I think I mentioned it about the cost per election when someone either leaves office, passes away, however a vacancy is created. And then I'm gonna have her go back. This is just, I think, the last two. So actually the two present it was, right now we have an open seat for the school committee, and it has to go to a special election. And it's to fill the rest of the term out, which is gonna be it's over 2 years, right? Over 2.5
2
years.
and a half years.
So I guess the question that was asked was, why can't we just put that on November's ballot to fit, that's just not how it works, because the term, you have to fill it by a certain amount of time according to the charter, and it has to be filled for the term. So unfortunately, it's costly, but it's the way that we do things.
Right.
And it's the reason why we have meetings like this and try to tweak things to make it.
So how much
work
did
better.
the special election we had for what was it, District 4 last year?
4,200.
So you're gonna consider.
For an
that
election
we-
that had one candidate.
Right.
Well, hang on,
Yeah, one candidate.
hang on.
Um,
Right.
I actually have this in here, and you'll get it. Can you get the other thing here? Let's see about that one. This is the Gary Cody seat. 65 people voted out of 5,214.
So another way, because when.
And only one person ran too, so.
Yeah,
Lori,
that's
when
sad.
One
Lori
person,
Anderson-
when people hear that,
I think for
Not
District
something.
1, when Ann Dixon ran, I think only 37 people voted in that.
I got that too.
And for the amount, when you just start dividing the dollars by the votes, your vote is worth a lot.
Yeah, it really is,
Yeah.
especially now with the
Yeah.
early voting. because
This was
That's 20 days of having someone
nonpartisan
in
school
here,
committee
clerk,
to
a
replace
moderator.
nonpartisan school committee to replace Ann Dixon's seat. Out of 5,290, there were 40 votes. And
and only
there-
one person ran, right?
and there was one that was cast blank.
Just to make a statement.
You showed up and just.
Oh,
People
no,
do
wait a
that,
minute, no,
yeah,
wait a
they-
minute.
they
How
do
many,
I'm
that.
wrong.
how many
I'm
write-ins?
wrong. This
Yeah,
was,
yeah,
this was for
write-ins.
Luke Murray's when he.
Yeah,
was
so
at
Luke,
Ann
Luke
left.
was being
Yeah,
elected to
yeah.
replace,
Right, he
Yeah.
replaced Ann, so he got 40 votes and one person didn't put a name on it.
So
There were
So
four, and there were
selection.
4 write-ins.
So-
and 4 write-ins, 4 write-ins.
Yeah.
So, I'll make sure that you get all the financial data for the next meeting too. And maybe we can kind of like round up round up where we're gonna be on this and agree, not take a formal vote, but maybe put it in the bucket list to say that we're pretty close to saying yes, and we're pretty close to saying no.
I think it's been suggested, and we'll talk about it further later, but even what is considered the next election when a special election is coming up. So is it something that you could throw on a ballot at your financial all-day referendum?
I was thinking the same thing, like,
The financial referendum is not considered an election.
Yeah,
Oh, it's not a Title
it's
17.
a referendum.
Right.
could we flip it the other way then? Like we do an election, special election, but I'm just trying to.
I know, that's right. If you
I think we
guys
should
aren't following.
concentrate on getting people to run for seats that'll stay there for the full term.
So maybe that's our biggest thing is the 4-year term is just too much.
Try to get someone to commit. Now, we have the school committee election that's gonna come up in District 1. Good luck with that, because,
Oh, gosh.
I mean, District 1 is
That's my representative.
yeah,
One of the questions
it's
is,
half the town.
what happens if we don't get anyone to file?
Yeah, what,
Right.
what does that?
And
And then what? Then the
Well-
council would have to appoint, right?
one of the things that, because President Dixon was very interested to know if there's anything we could do to expedite this election. So if there was only one person to file, could we just make the primary in April, the final election, and be done with it? But the problem is because under Title 17 and the notification requirements, 70 days notice for the primary, 70 days notice for the general.
Right.
Up until the last day, you could have write-in candidates that would be disenfranchised by not following the process, and therefore you can't speed it up. with a couple of things.
Which actually, the charter does go against state law, but it allows
which
That
one?
doesn't surprise
on,
me.
on the calling of a special election, the time period that it gives the clerk to call the election versus the 45 days. I don't want to get into the whole process, but it's not enough, so it doesn't line up with the state law. So we're gonna have to look at that.
Can you
I'll pull it.
highlight that
I
for
will.
us? And we'll talk about that next week.
I ran into that problem in my own municipality.
Oh,
back
you
in
did?
April. That's why I looked at it.
Well-
So, I mean,
There may be one question we want to
Unfortunately-
put that just has all technical alignment.
well, I think that's a
Questions
question
to
that I
it.
would have for a solicitor is if there is something in the charter.
Do we need to
that-
actually
Do
approve
we
it?
actually need to have that approved? If it violates state law,
Or does the fact that it's
can we just
superseded
change
just?
it to go with state
So
law
you-
without?
It's
Is there-
almost like having a consent agenda on the ballot
Is
Right.
to comply.
Is that original language or is that an amendment?
That's a good question. Let me find out. I'll find it first. Where is it? I just had it. I was just looking at it.
Mhm.
Vacancy, here we go.
See how great it is when you have a written form in front of you?
It was amended in 2014.
Okay, so there you go. So you, at the next meeting, you will have the original language and you will have the amended language
Perfect.
in black and white in front of you.
And I just want to reference the state law to make sure that we have that all in order, the timeline
Mhm.
of, when the clerk has to call it versus, when the vacancy has to be filled. So make sure, because again, especially if you have a partisan election. So
Do you think that was changed because of
it might have
part of
been,
the nonpartisan thing?
it could be.
And maybe it was overlooked, because I saw something in, somewhere along my-
Comment section.
You're in 3.06, filling the vacancy. And it's different. Under
Yeah, that's why I
school
just said-
committee as
yeah.
well, because the timeline is 12 months versus 6, but I'm not sure if it says, if it gives the.
It's not
language.
403, is it?
Nope, 3.06.
Vacancy on the last sentence under 4.03, I had a question with that.
Oh, all right. Well,
I think that it was inconsistent with the nonpartisan language. It may have been something that they forgot.
Well, I'll take the week to take it.
All right, good. And I'm gonna do the same, because I read through it all the time, man,
Yeah,
and I'm saying, why is this still here when they did this? Kind of like
right.
negates
I think
something,
sometimes
so-
people just don't know.
Yeah,
Well, that's the problem with amendments, when you're not tracking all the parts of the document.
Yeah.
To be having that cross document consistency.
Right, exactly.
And, so for next week, I'm gonna ask you, if you'll call Lori and ask her if she'll give us the rundown of, all of the special elections and all of the special elections in the last 10 years. And so it should include something before we went to nonpartisan.
Right.
So if, and then maybe one where someone either passed away or decided not to run. Sure.
So
So I'd like to pick one of those up and see what the cost is, when it relates to nonpartisan and partisan.
just a
because-
food for thought,
Yep.
when we're thinking about all of this, including the special elections and the vacancies, if we are partisan and Luke Murray resigns and we have 2 Republican candidates that come forward, now you need to have a primary before you have, so you're not just talking one special election, you're talking 2, with both of them with 20 days. So that's another pro con to moving to a partisan situation, just so everyone's thinking of that.
Good point. I'm not sure you're gonna get one person that wants to run.
I know. We could only wish, right?
Whether it was partisan or
I
nonpartisan.
know,
It's just-
I know.
Jim, were you about to say something, by the way?
Nope.
All right.
Sorry,
You
I don't mean to
guys
have my
have-
back to you guys, I feel.
That's okay, it's fine. We have a nice profile of you.
Do you or Bob have any other questions?
Nope, I'm good.
Did you feel we had a productive meeting?
I do.
Good,
I do too.
good. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good evening.
Second by many. Multiple seconds.